is the nexus between pastor and activist?
Yeah. There is a very direct connection.
Okay.
And I learned this, and I was pastoring Diamond Hill in Lynchburg. I pastored there for 6.5 years, right? First of all, the preacher, the main qualification for a pastor is you got to love the Lord and love the people. Anything else is okay. But if you got that, you got... And so I had, when it came time for the white folks downtown to tell the head Negroes in town to get rid of that mayor, right? I learned then in a meeting that had been called in my church to vote me out, right? And folks started popping up all over the sanctuary saying, who the devil they think they are to tell us what we're going to do with our pastor? We love our pastor. Folks have started saying things like, I remember one sister said, you know, that I had a habit as a pastor, right? My people are going through whatever. I'm there. I'm a shepherd. I love being a shepherd. And when you love the sheep will close ranks around the pasture. So, here's what I'm going to say. If you want to have the luxury of working outside the church, then you better be a good pastor, a good shepherd inside the church. I think that's the major connection. The sheep will protect the shepherd, right? If the shepherd has given the sheep something, reason why they should protect it. I've seen that play out over and over. Some people have kind of, and I've probably helped a lot of us on this, is that for some people, civil rights was a fad. We're always looking for some fad that makes us kind of special. Be careful of that. Be a good pastor first. Then work beyond. You have legitimacy. You have networks. You have institutional support. I just love. I've been blessed. I have 3 full-time pastors. My church in Virginia, the meeting that was called to take me out, the richest Negro in town was chairman of my trustee board. A nice man. And the white folks told him, y'all got to get rid of him. Now, this guy was just a sweetheart of a guy. He was head of business. For the 6.5 years I was in that city, he never let us pay for our clothes, dry cleaning and stuff. He was just a good-hearted man. But when the white folks talked with him, he got confused. If I could get to him before he got back to the white folks, his confusion would lift. So they said, you got to get rid of him. So they went to work on that, right? And the meeting that was supposed to do that, them folks, just like I said, they said, no, we're not going to get rid of this pastor. We're going to give him a This Is Your Life program, and we're going to show him how much we love him. And they gave me more money than I had ever seen. That night, my wife and I spent wee hours in the morning counting money. and we had to make it out of town. I'm just talking about the love of the people, man. When you stood up for the people, and you've been a good pastor, and you're out there not for a show, but because because they are paying you, they're giving you the ability to stand in places and confront the powers that be that they can't confront. I had a group of my school teachers and lawyers and doctors and all. They were meeting, and they sent a teacher to see me. And sister, I'll never forget her, Sister Polium, Virginia Polium, Mary Polium. She said, Pastor, we want you to know we love what you're doing. We can't go to jail with you. We can't pick it with you. Our jobs and all this. But we want you to know that as long as you want to be pastor of this church, your leadership will never be questioned. God, I'm telling you. It just thrills my heart to even think about it, The people will protect you when God will use the people to protect the value of what you bring to them if they see the value. If you feed the sheep and not eating the sheep.
Wow.
That's what Brendan John says.
Some of our intellectual heroes that in many ways are being written out of history.
Yes.
Immediately, Dr. Benjamin Mays comes to mind, and Howard Thurman comes to mind.
Yes.
Can you perhaps give us greater insight on their fingerprint on the movement?
Yes, absolutely. There have been no movement without those fathers and mothers. Now, if you ask the average person who's the mother of the modern day civil rights movement, we all know everybody would say Rosa Parks, right? If you say, who's the father of the modern day civil rights movement, right? Most of the time they say Martin Luther King. They'd be wrong. They'd be wrong. You got to start with Mays, Daddy King. Daddy King's story is a phenomenal story. People don't know his story. I mean, they don't know that. They just know he was Martin Luther King's dad. I don't even know what Martin Luther King's dad. Allison Davis documented in his book, Leadership, Love, and Aggression, as a twig is bent. He does the psychological history of 4 black leaders. One is Martin Luther King, Richard Wright, Du Bois, and Fred Douglass. He shows their relationship to their fathers. And only Martin Luther King was the full-bodied, authentic leader that his times required based on the interplay of Daddy King's Jesus and Martin Luther King's Jesus. It is awesome. It is awesome. When Martin was at Morehouse, he felt he had outgrown his daddy's conservative theology. So at Morehouse, at Ebenezer on Sunday morning, when to go through the service, he'd stay there until time for the sermon. He'd go down to Wheat Street to hear the sophisticated William Holmes Borders, right?
I've heard this.
Watch this. Watch this. This blows my mind. Daddy King's Jesus was not adequate to him while he was in that academic phase. Watch this. When he is now in the kitchen table, leading the movement, when ain't no academic resource can serve his dilemma. He's at his Waterloo, right? Scared to death. Those hate calls are coming, nigga, we're going to kill you, we're going to burn your house, we're going to kill your wife, children, all that stuff. And he said, God, I can't handle this. I need to give up. And then he's in a dialogue with himself, and he said, well, if I give up, the people have confidence in me. I've got them out here myself, but I'm scared to death. I don't know what to do. And you know the story, said, I heard his voice. After wrestling with the angels, and the angels and the demons, wrestling in that kitchen table, them pots of coffee, and all of that. And then he said, I heard this voice that said, Martin Luther King, stand up for righteousness. Stand up for justice. I'll be with you. He said, all fear left, Doc. All fear left. All fear left. And guess what? He never turned back from that moment. That was his Gethsemane moment. And he never turned back from that moment. And here's what's interesting about it. When he was going to be arrested now, after the suit, the New York Times suit and all, and he was in Atlanta, the baby, Coretta and the baby in Atlanta, and Daddy King had pulled together the heavyweights of Atlanta to convince him not to go back. You can't go back, Mom, right? I'm talking about the Jesus journey now. So you can't go back. You can't go back. And all of them spoke. And when Martin said why he had to go back, Daddy King shrieked. I heard the shriek in '64. When Martin was sitting in the board meeting in Baltimore, we're in an old hotel now torn down in Baltimore. And Martin said, I want you all, before we part, to appoint Ralph senior vice president so he can succeed me immediately. So when my day comes, that's the way he talked about the day his life would be required. He said, when my day comes, he didn't say if my day comes, he said, when my day comes, Daddy King hit the floor. I heard him shriek, hit the floor. Martin, stop talking like that. I don't like to hear you talk like that, right? And Martin said, well, Daddy, we got to face the reality. We got to face the reality. This was in 1960, the year the Nobel Peace Prize, 64. The conversation was starting that he was going to get the Nobel Peace Prize that year. So the hellhounds were now on his trail now. And so he was prepared. But I think he got prepared back in Montgomery, January 1956, because 2 weeks later when his house was bombed, you know that story. And he's called out of the mass meeting to come home. He comes home, he sees all the damage. the men of the community are gathering around the parsonage on South Jackson Street, right? By the time he goes in, checks on Coretta and the baby and the visitor, comes back out on the porch. Porch is in shambles, right? Comes back out on the porch. The street is lined up. These black men, armed to the teeth, shotguns, pistols, and a handful of police, white police. They didn't know what to do. And one black brother looked at one of the policemen and said, well, you got your heat, I got mine, but we can have it out tonight. Martin comes out on that porch, Doc. I'm talking about his Jesus journey now. Jesus is real now, Doc. Comes out on that porch that night. This is 2 weeks after the kitchen table experience, right? He comes out on that porch and he says, now, my brothers, I've examined everything, and Coretta's all right, and the baby, Yoki, is okay, and Ms. Jones, who the lady said, I want you to do this. We're all right. Now I want you to put up your weapons and go home. I'm not sure he could have done that if he hadn't had that kitchen table at Epiphany. That was just weeks before that. Isn't that amazing? After the kitchen table, Epiphany, his Jesus and Daddy King's Jesus got on the same page, right? But that's a great story. We'll talk more about it sometimes because eventually, the moment you read about it in Daddy King's autobiography, the day King said to his mother, I want you to be ready because they're going to kill me. And he says to his mother, how he goes up through that. Daddy King was supportive of his wife in that moment. He had already made his peace that Martin's life was going to be required. It's awesome. People don't understand that the greatness of Martin Luther King was his faithfulness to the Jesus journey. And the Jesus journey is the one that Jesus started. And you're on it. You know you're on it when you are doing what Jesus called you to do. And he never said, worship me. He said, follow me.
Right.
Follow me. If we can get that straight, we'll save ourselves. Afro-Christendom will save itself and help to save the globe.
What role did preaching play in the civil rights movement?
Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Preaching is absolutely indispensable. Jesus said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news. Proclaiming the good news is not just talking. It's almost, it's like the word that is spoken is an action of its own. My word will not return to me void. When my word goes out there, it's going to accomplish what I purposed it for. And when Jesus finished that, as you know, he said to that synagogue that day in the hometown, this day, this scripture is fulfilled. Not after a while. This day, this scripture. Once the word of truth is spoken, it has receptivity somewhere. That's why you got to preach Jesus. Preach Jesus. Preach Jesus. And if black preachers will do that, white preachers too, because a lot of white preachers is preaching Jesus. Some white preachers out here is doing more good Jesus than some black preachers. We got to get over that idea that we the only ones got the faithful gospel. That ain't true. Even the rabbis preach Jesus. They just don't use our language. Anytime you preach love, you're preaching Jesus. The imams, some imams preaching Jesus. They don't know it. And I just have to tell you this little story. I just have to tell you this little story because this is one of the things I want to see happen before I leave this earth. If black preachers, right? Black preachers and the white preachers, black preachers and the white preachers who've been faithful to what I'm talking about, understand Jesus as the shepherd of the global soul. Martin Luther King as a shepherd of the American soul, right? Now, suppose we join Martin as shepherds of the soul, right? Let the Afro-Christian preacher get it right first, then invite the white preacher and the priest with us, and then we invite the rabbi, because they had it before we had it. See, we got to introduce Jews to Jesus, not to say you got to join our church, you got to join our movement called Christianity, because the whole business about loving the Lord and loving your neighbor is y'all stuff. It was y'all stuff before we got a hold of it, right? And in some ways, y'all do more with it than we do. So we got to learn from the Jews, they got to learn from us. We all got to learn from the Muslims, they got to learn from us. When we all do that, We'll get at a table with Martin Luther King. I like to call it the shepherd's table. Get the shepherd's table right. The leaders get it right. Then we invite the servants. So you got the shepherd's table, the servants' circle. In the servants' circle and at the shepherd's table, they start praying for each other. They just pray for each other. That's the first agenda. We're going to pray for each other. I would love to see in every city, I'd love to see every pastor a part of a threesome that prays with and for each other every week. 3 pastors. See, the problem is most pastors are competing. They see themselves as competitors and not cooperators. If we are cooperating, we are wishing for the best for each other. We're praying for each other's families and all of that. We're carrying the burden. Who's going to be the shepherd to the shepherd? Your pastor, you better have you a shepherd. Sometimes it's not going to be another preacher. Sometimes it's going to be somebody that nobody knows but you. But grandma put her arms around the pastor and say, I know you ain't no good. I know you ain't no good, but you my pastor. I ain't going to let nobody mess with you. Touch not the Lord's anointed. Do my servant no harm. That's grandma.